What if the most honest conversation you're having is not the one you speak out loud, but the one you have in your mind when your mind whispers to you while you're asleep? What if your dreams are not random noise or late night brain static, but intelligent signals trying to get your attention? Signals about your fear or your desire or maybe unresolved grief, ambition, love, regret, possibility? We spend our waking hours trying to stay in control, stay productive, staying composed, and yet every night our subconscious grabs a megaphone and tells us some truth. Consider this. The goal shouldn't be to silence those dreams, but to listen longer and with more humility. Because maybe dreaming is not an escape from reality, it is a deep confrontation with it. Hey, my friends, welcome back to the Uncommodified podcast. My guest today on the show once again is Lenore Walker. Lenore, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Oh, we're going to have some fun. Now, I want to officially introduce Lenore tonight a little differently. So, Lenore and I were chatting. You know, if you follow along, you know that Lenore's been on the show a couple of times, and that Lenore is a great friend of myself and my wife, Pam. We've known her for about 30 years plus. And so tonight, I want to officially introduce Lenore as the resident psychotherapist of the Uncommodified podcast. Lenore, welcome as this now. Thank you.
Thank you. It is a real honor, and it's such a treat for me to be able to share this way because it lets me reach more people and hopefully some people who maybe can't afford therapy at this time, but they've had some questions about some of the topics that we're going to talk about, and it might just help them to kind of make their way onward.
Absolutely. And I'm all for what Lenore just said. And then I'm going to add, because everybody needs a psychotherapist, I think. I definitely know I need one. So if you're listening and you need a psychotherapist, clap your hands. I like that right there. Excellent. Let's clap our hands for that. Lenore, I love this. And of course, this is an uncorked conversation. And so we're going to uncork it in a little untraditional way tonight. What are you drinking?
So I'm drinking something that originally came from India and thereabouts.
Okay. Yeah.
I got to give it a little stir with my cinnamon stick. It's called Gold Milk.
Gold Milk.
And where I really first found out about it was 10 years ago from Jonna Yinton. If you aren't following her, I highly recommend her. She's an amazing young woman in Sweden. Anyway, she shared this recipe for it, and it's really kind of become a world over nighttime tonic. And it has all good natural ingredients in it, and it actually can help promote healthy sleep.
Okay,
So
well,
that's why I chose Gold Milk.
Good
tonight.
choice. Good choice. I just want you to know, I went to the tea cupboard tonight. Don't normally drink tea. Of course, if you listen in, I usually am into the beer or scotch. And of course, with Lenore, I'm into the whiskey too, because she likes the whiskey.
Yep.
But tonight we did this a little different. I went to the cupboard and I wanted to find sleepy time tea because I thought that'd be fun. I couldn't find any sleepy time tea. But I do have, I love licorice tea. So I have licorice spice tea. And so I'm going to drink that. So cheers to you.
That's great. Cheers.
You know, I do like the licorice spice. I do like the licorice spice. Okay, let me kick this conversation off. Of course, you should know by now, listeners, that you're listening for a reason. I always say that. And obviously, based on my introduction, you might have figured out that we're going to braille into the idea of our dreams and our dream world. And it comes a little bit out of our last conversation, Lenore, we had, because you made some comments about the wonderful world of Alice and some of the things that could happen down that little hole as we go down. That's kind of fun. But I'm just going to start here right on the nose of this and ask you a question, and we'll just sort of move in and figure this out. So I'm very interested in dreams. I find them fascinating. But I really would like to start with this just very basic question. Why do we dream, potentially? And like, what are they? And is it always the same thing or is it something different? Like, how do we get in here? So take us into this world and help us understand it a little bit more. And let's see where we go with the conversation.
That's a really big picture question. And I love where we're starting because it's kind of a metaphor for how we do live with our dreams. It's usually there's a big picture and then there's our own local journey that kind of factors into that. I'm not sure that I would be the best to answer those questions. There are volumes and volumes written about them, but from my humble perspective, I find that dreams are a way that a human soul develops another system of language and self-expression. That's just Lenore defining that. And what was the next part of your question? Sorry.
So I want to know, like, why do we dream? What are dreams? Why do we have these things?
My sense about why we dream, and I'm not always so aligned with the questions of why, although I appreciate them,
Okay.
because I find that they can kind of narrow our focus to trying to get just an intellectual answer, which is of value. I like to ask, what are dreams doing? What? So I'm kind of
Okay.
Sherlocking
You
my
know what? I
way, or
think you should,
Agatha
by the way,
Christieing my way through this.
well,
Yeah.
let me put it this way. I'm going to give the wheel of this conversation over to you right now because you're right. See, I'm already in my head too much. I'm already trying to figure this out
Well, we need
intellectually.
that though.
Okay, I
That's
know, but I put my hand up. This is true. I'm trying to intellectualize the shit out of this already, Lenore.
Well,
So,
this is what's really cool is we are so enculturated here
yeah,
in North America to aim at anything from our rational intellectual function. And
yeah,
that does serve us well to a point. However, like I said the last time, there are many different databases. We operate on
yeah.
different functions, and those don't always get as much airtime in the way that we've been socialized to behave and perform, quite frankly, in our culture as the intellect. You know, that's the one that everyone thinks is verifiable. That's the one that's got the quantitative evidence backing, you know, the evidentiary based outcomes, all of that. And yet, even scientists will be the first to say to you that there is something mythological and mysterious about what it means to be human in this amazing cosmos and on this planet floating in the mix of this galaxy. So I like to ask the question, what are dreams? Which I can't easily answer. There are lots of answers that are given where they're just residue from your day, or it's your psyche trying to work things out in the sleep time. There's tons of answers. There's as many answers as there are maybe people. What I like to do is just say, okay, they're happening, and
Yes,
go
they
with
are.
that. I don't always need to know the origin story of where something comes from. The fact that in my present here and now moment, it's happening to me is probably worth my paying attention to. So if you're a person who does dream and you find them kind of a combination of fascinating and confusing and mystifying, there's room for you at the table. If you're a person who doesn't dream or you don't remember your dreams, there's room for you at this table. And if you're someone who daydreams almost exclusively and doesn't have seemingly night dreams, there's room for you at this table. And if you think dreams are just poppycock, then there's room for you at this table too.
Well, you know what? There's a lot. You know what? I love this. There's a lot of room at the table tonight.
There's
I
a
love,
lot of room at the table.
Lenore. I love
And
that.
it's, you know, dreams, I find personally, are a different language that we all
Mm,
have available. Maybe that's not even the best way to describe it. Perhaps it's better described as an undiscovered country within
mm,
the self.
mm.
And I really like this idea of borrowing travel metaphors with dreams, because I don't know how your dreams are. Mine are the kind that when I go to sleep, I enter this terrain that both feels familiar yet very numinous and different and almost alien,
Hmm.
you know? And it's fascinating and also at times a little scary, if I'm going to be honest, and everything in between. And so dreams, though, I feel are like a portal for our soul to actually communicate with our waking self.
Hmm.
and they offer content to us that personally I believe comes from this deep inner reservoir of wisdom that each of us actually have for our own life's journey. Some people don't believe they have that, but I tend to think that we do. I really have found in my work with clients and my own journey that there's a whole lot of wisdom already inside there, that I'm actually already whole. It's just that life circumstances, certain encounters I've had along the way cause me to doubt that or to not believe that. Dreams, I think, are maybe our biggest cheerleader, that there is wisdom actually deep inside, and that we each come equipped with our own personal GPS locate system. And
Huh.
dreams are the way that it kind of conveys messages and guidance for our day-to-day life. However, it offers it in such a way that we are challenged and captivated at the same time. And maybe it's because dreams know that unless that combination exists, we would be very prone to throw them under the threshold and to
Huh,
not pay
interesting.
attention.
So, you've used this term. So, first of all, this is going to be a great conversation, and I'm already just my mind's already spinning all over the place, which I really love.
And I
Um,
like your mind.
yeah, I like my mind when it gets like I'm like, what am I hearing? I love this. So, you used the term several times when we've chatted before, whether it's on the podcast or whether we're just chatting over dinner at our house. This term, throwing something under the threshold.
Yeah.
Can you just, I'd like to believe I think I know what that means, and maybe my listeners do, but can you help me understand when you use that term therapeutically or as a psychotherapist or just as Lenore, what does that mean to you, and how should I or might I want to understand that?
So that's an excellent question, and it's great because we don't want to assume, from a phrase that I use quite frequently, that we understand its implications. So I tend to think that we come to the world wired with various components, and I'm grounded in the work of Dr. Carl Jung, and so I've adopted and adapted some of his approach, which he would have said this, that when we come into this physical form, we actually come as a whole being. But there's this thing that happens where we kind of maybe come through this dimension or veil where we forget certain things
Mm,
about our essential, authentic self. And as we begin to grow up and we're young children, we're picking up a lot of information from our environment and figuring out how we fit in. And that is the ego's job, to figure out how we fit in. That can include roles that we, adopt, like sister, friend, daughter, whatever. It can include certain preferences about the way we keep ourselves safe. And all of this kind of gets collected into this template or system that we use. It sometimes also comes with a persona or a mask of how we present ourselves to the world. And we actually need this because it is what keeps us safe and helps us figure out how to navigate the human collective we find ourselves in early in life.
mm,
And for some people, this is what has actually saved their lives, to
mm,
get to adulthood because they were born into very tragic and difficult situations.
mm.
The thing with the ego, though, is that it's really good at kind of thinking ahead, projecting ahead, reacting based on what it thinks is quantitative evidence but isn't. And it shapes this kind of template of how things should go and what can be. And if it doesn't fit into that, it throws it under the threshold.
Hmm.
So when we throw something under the threshold, it it doesn't just go away. It actually goes into what I call the deep brewing space within the human organism. And that is the area of soul, psyche, and often the authentic self. And the authentic self is just a really good caregiver. It takes really good care of all that. And it says, oh, there's a dissonance here, or a fracture or a break or a fragmentation between how I'm showing up in the world and what I really believe to be true.
Hmm.
And so I'm going to use the mystery of the dream time to let it percolate up to the subconscious in the hopes that I'm personifying this a lot, but in the hopes that when the dreamer wakes, images will linger. And those images are going to be so soaked with meaning, but a little bit confounding, that it's going to grab their attention and cause them to go, I wonder what that's about. But it's right at that juncture with the dream that the ego could come back on board. Even the dream ego can come on board and say, nope, we're not going there. And so, again, kind of gets put off to the back burner. But I have to say something, is that I have not met one person yet, including myself, who has not had things that they have thrown under the threshold, whether unconsciously or consciously, that didn't percolate back up to the consciousness somehow at a later time in life.
That's fascinating. So I really love the metaphor and the imagery, which is interesting because that's the one thing I find fascinating about dreams. It's not like when I dream, it's not like I'm hearing a speech. It's the imagery, it's the movie that I'm in, which is really interesting because it isn't just word. It isn't just, I'm not just hearing a voice. I'm in a play. I'm an actor at a play. Sometimes I'm an observer. Sometimes sometimes it's like a first player sort of role play game. But I'm inside of this thing. And so what you're partly telling me is, from your vantage point and from your understanding, part of that is my own inner wisdom speaking to me potentially. The thing that I have had, but somehow gets lost in the midst of my life or my day. And some of it might be that that inner wisdom bringing up things to me that I've tried to or wanted to bury under that threshold, so I don't have to think about them or figure them out. That's sort of interesting. So can I ask you, is that why potentially? So I don't know if everybody has, but I have some reoccurring dreams that I have. I have the same. It's almost exactly the same dream every time. What's different is the only thing different is the person in the dream other than me. And it's usually somebody I don't know. So it's not somebody that's known to me, but I have the same dream and I have it's the same pathway I take in this house that I dream in. I have the same epiphany each time, like I'm having it the same for the first time every time, yet I already know it. It's this sort of strange thing. So
Fascinating. I
help
love
me
that.
understand that, or how would I want to approach thinking about that?
Well, first of all, it's really important for us to realize that the dream imagery contains symbols, not signs. Signs
Okay.
of directions, stop, go, cautions, whatever. But symbols are laden with this numinous imagery that is hard to figure out. And that's the whole point, because they are a way of knowing that, for the first foray, bypasses our intellect and even bypasses our ability to construct language around what we're seeing, which is actually very important when you look at the brain, because when the brain goes to the intellectual function and the language center first, we usually lose the database that comes from the emotion tones, from the intuition, from the instinct, and from the body sensations. And those are all very important frameworks to factor in here that we get information through. So, the dream imagery is meant to be a little strange or captivating, or because they carry emotion primarily.
Interesting.
They're asking for us to emotionally engage on the border of transformation, you know, because dreams usually are all about us having to continue to evolve our identity as we know it. So we're going into, like I said before, the undiscovered country.
Yeah.
Now, in answer to your specific dream, usually when a client comes to me and we've tracked the same kind of trappings of a dream over time, we've now got a beautiful pattern that can really be helpful. And usually the ancient understanding, and this comes from shamanic and indigenous traditions, which I borrow from, and so did Jung, is if the dreamer dreams that way, it's because they are becoming more deeply in touch with their life and their soul's work. So
Wow.
what they are made to bring to the collective in a co-creative way. And so those dreams are really significant. That's when we do want to sit down with someone who knows how to work with this, to come
Yeah.
alongside you, to help you see the associations you make to the various symbol pieces in your dream. So the imagery, what it represents to you, and then what sense it makes of it, but also to throw into the mix the counter hypothesis, just so the dream ego also doesn't go into hyper safety mode and keep you just almost bypassing the real heart of the message. Because we're very interesting creatures. We are all about our own safety, and we will bypass a message that feels uncomfortable for us because there's a place deep in every one of us that feels, I just don't have the distress tolerance for that,
Yeah.
or the patience, or whatever.
Yeah. By the way, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you're seeing my perplexed face a lot right now because I am like perplexed. I'm like, which I love, by the way. I mean, there's nothing like a good, well, first of all, nothing like a good licorice tea. But there's nothing like a really great dose of perplexion where you just like sit back and you rub your chin and you go, holy
What?
shit, that is really perplexing,
Mhm.
this stuff. So again, if you're
Or
listening in,
may I
I always
just
say you're
really,
listening for a reason. Remember, you're listening for a
yeah.
reason. I hope you're getting perplexed about your life and about your ego and about your dreams and about your most authentic, uncommodified self that's trying to find its way from underneath the threshold. I mean, I love this conversation, Lenore. So, and what I love about it is we don't rehearse these conversations. So we say, hey, let's talk about dreams, and then we got to figure it out as we go. So, okay, can I do something now which I never prepared you for? But I'm doing it anyway. So I like to understand this about dreams. So I've had dreams at times in my life that were absolutely critical in the moment. I found them wonderfully instructive. I found them, I would say, revelatory. I would use that word, where I was confused and trying to figure something out, and I had a dream, and in that dream actually brought tremendous clarity to me,
Mhm.
direction, a lot of different things. What's that all about?
Well, all I can do is answer from my own experience and that I've kind of gathered and gleaned from working with people. And the dreams that we remember are usually soul work, in
Hmm,
my humble opinion. The ones that we don't remember are usually preparation for the ones that we will remember.
interesting.
And dreams that give direction that's specific to the moment do occur. What I find intriguing, because I just had one of those a few months ago, and it was incredibly specific
Hmm,
to the actual circumstances I found myself in, which were unexpected. And yet, still there, we want to look at our imagery and just be sure that we check our associations and what possibilities those pieces of the dream might represent for us. So,
yeah.
for instance, in my dream, I was driving in my car and I thought, oh, I'll go the scenic route. And that was just a little diversion through my neighborhood. And in the dream, I heard a voice actually say, which is very rare for me. This seldom happens, which is why it was so memorable and why I could see it was so specific in its guidance for that moment. But I heard a voice say, Lenore, please take the most direct route.
Hmm.
And I was just and then I woke up and I went, oh my goodness, because the circumstance I was in had numerous options, all of
Interesting.
which were good. And I couldn't really tell which would be maybe better.
Hmm.
And in truth, neither was better. However, in the mystery of all that is, something knew that I needed some support
Yeah.
and guidance about taking a specific path, because I very rarely am in a decision-making conundrum, but this time I was. And as I was waking up in the dream, I was rerouting the car to go the more straightforward route. When I woke up, I thought, oh, I know what I need to do.
Interesting. So let's just talk about that for a second, and then I'll share my dream just because it's interesting to me, and I don't really share it a lot, and I'll articulate it on the podcast because I think it's interesting. But let's talk about that for a second. So we talked about the inner wisdom speaking, maybe our inner wisdom speaking through dreams, things that we maybe sort of push down, they come up and they find us. In this case, do you think is the source for you? Do you feel like the source of that wisdom was your inner wisdom? Do you feel that that was some spiritual wisdom beyond you trying to find you when you're in a place where you'd be open enough to hear it? Like, how do you look at that?
Uh, all of that.
All of it and more.
So, and that allows me to talk about something that I think is really important in these times, which dreams touch on this, is yes, it was my inner wisdom. Yes, it was a type of source wisdom that Jung would have called the transcendent function, the self who becomes whole. So capital S, self.
Hmm.
And also source that is beyond me because I'm part of a cosmos of many energies, benefic and otherwise, that are existing here. All these energies are here to help me, even if they seem not so helpful. By contrast, they can help instruct and guide me and help me clarify thought. This is where I feel that in these times, it's incredibly important for us to acknowledge our dreams a little bit more, because when you do, you're actually getting a straight line into who you really are, what this gig we've called life is all about, and where you fit in that cosmology. We're not talking theology. We're not even talking spirituality here. We're talking cosmology. And Jung was all about that. It was, where are you in this big, big picture? Because it matters. And we are gleaning transpersonal energy from a larger collective storyline that is so much more than a story. It's a mythology and a poetry and an art form all rolled up into one. And we are smaller microcosmic representations of that same thing. So in answer to your question, yes, all of the above.
Yes, all of the above. Awesome. Again, if you're listening, I always say you're listening for a reason. This is a great conversation. And these are the kind of conversations that Lenore are going to have more times in 2026 as we get together to talk about some things that come out of her experience and out of her learning. And I really love it. So let me give you the circumstance and share the dream I had, because in fact, it actually now resides on my shoulder as a tattoo, to be honest, this dream.
Oh, cool.
So I was doing a lot of work in Africa at the time, in Mozambique particularly, and I had developed a program where I was training government leaders leadership skills, and I was flying over every 2 months or a week at a time for almost 2 years, and I was running a program. We funded it all ourselves, and I was really struggling in the beginning days because it was very clear that some of the people in the group weren't there for maybe the right reasons, and I felt like I was being played a little bit, and there was a lot of competition for individual time with me, and I couldn't figure out who I should say yes to, and I felt very torn and conflicted. It was a real struggle for me. And I went to bed one evening and I had this dream, and this dream was transformative to me. It changed the way, it gave me direction and changed the way I approached it. And in this dream, I walked up a hill and there was a castle at the top of this hill. The castle was beautiful. It looked just like a traditional castle in my mind, in my dream that you would see, in medieval times. The one thing out of place about the castle, though, and I'll come to this later, was the windows were all the shapes of stars. So the castle was intact as a regular castle, but the one thing I noted was it had star-shaped windows, which was strange to me. I walked into the foyer of this castle, and it was very clear to me that I felt compulsed to go up the stairs. I don't know why. I just felt like I needed to ascend the stairs. And when I went up the staircase, I came to this top, and it was an open rooftop to the sky, and the sky was brilliant. The sun was brilliantly shining. The sky was blue. And there was a circle of African Mozambican men that were around the edge, almost like knights would be around a round table, but they're around. This was a round sort of turret, but it was open to the sky. And there was all of these Mozambican men standing on the outside, and a very clearly stately, kingly figure to me, although I never saw them. I felt their presence, and I felt an invitation to come and kneel in the middle of the circle. And so I went to the middle of the circle and I knelt down. And when I knelt down, all of a sudden, as I looked up, an eagle came and began to encircle the top of this castle. And as it got closer, I noticed that it had like a red sort of sash in its beak. And by the way, I don't usually dream this vividly, but this is exactly the dream. And then what happened was I heard that voice again of that sort of stately figure come into my mind, or how it worked. And as the eagle encircled, the eagle laid that sash on the shoulder of some of the men, but not all of them. And then in its last sort of thing, brought that and put it on my shoulder. And I heard it just as clear as day from this sort of stately, kingly presence. This is compassion. And my dream was over. And so I woke up, and it was just this vivid dream. I recorded it. I wrote it down.
Excellent.
And I began to very quickly have the sense that the instructive wisdom I was looking for is I needed to find men who had authority but compassion, because compassion was the balancing force that would get them to use their authority and power in that culture for good and not for bad purposes. So it became very quickly clear to me that was the instruction. The strange thing, though, was I couldn't understand the star windows until I shared the dream with the nurses I was working with. And when I told Tracy Evans, the weirdest thing is it was the windows were star-shaped. She said, well, that's not weird at all. And she showed me a Mozambican flag, which is encircled in stars. It's a circle of stars. And so it was very clear to me, at least, again, maybe I made it all up, but it was very clear to me that this was instructional wisdom. And so what I did then in the next 2 years I worked there, that when I encountered primarily men, it was men leaders there, when I found men who were men of great authority but tremendous compassion, those are the people I invested more in. Mm-hmm. And so it became this instructional guide. And so on my upper arm, I have this tattoo of an eagle with the sash in its beak, and it says, written on the sash is compassion.
Love it.
And so there's this wonderful sort of balance between power and authority and compassion for using that authority in ways that is for the benefit of others. So that's that. I've had lots of different dreams, but that was the clearest, most instructional dream I've ever had in my life.
That's amazing. And the fact that you so vividly recounted it here shows that you showed up to it and you made a commitment to your own soul to prioritize the relationship that you have with yourself and the dialogue that you have with yourself, which is really what dreams are asking us to do.
Hmm.
And just as an aside, as your local art therapist, I
Yeah.
love that you went and took the imagery and actually put it on your body.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everybody has to do that, but I
No.
have numerous clients who have had some significant symbol come to them, and they have chosen to get a tattoo or have an artwork made or make an artwork of their own or find someone who can do that for them, because you see, these are the symbols that come along with the map of our
Hmm.
consciousness.
Hmm.
So they continue to be like waymarkers
Hmm.
along the way. We can go back and recall that and look at that, and it stands the test of time.
Wow.
It continues to speak long after the incident that the dream and the timing in which the dream occurred, because it's so much bigger. And this is where we're getting into cosmology, that bigger story. I mean, what you touched on here is a principle of living as a authentic, kind, loving human in a vast universe. And just as an aside,
Yeah.
for those of your listeners who may be of more of a esoteric persuasion, there is fairly good evidence that we are not alone here,
Hmm.
and that there are many benefic energies and other beings who are supporting us, and who knows how they communicate. They may be able to, with some kind of, I don't know, protocol, be able to touch into our experience here, because they care about what we're doing here, because we're part of a much bigger thing and supporting us. And I've had clients say to me, "You're going to think I'm nuts. You're going to think I'm nuts." I said, "No, I pretty much heard quite a
I
bit
know.
here." And they tell me about these encounters that they've had. I've even had one where the dream became a little bit like a hologram.
Hmm.
And when, they wake up, they don't know where they are. And
Wow.
sometimes I have wondered, I thought, I wonder what's really going on there. It is not a psychotic break. There is no negative episode going on here. These are balanced people who are doing the work, doing their life. And, something transcendent is occurring there. So I just want to make some room for that. I don't know what that actually is, but I'm certainly not factoring it out.
Yeah, and that's good, and I think that's important. And again, if you're listening in, you're gonna grid this conversation through your lived experience, through your upbringing, through your beliefs, lots of different things. So, and listen, I hesitate to bring this up at this point in the conversation, but I think it's important. Some people have dreams that aren't so wonderful.
Yeah.
I think we call them nightmares.
Hmm.
And some people suffer debilitating nightmares. I know some people who have reoccurring nightmares, and they're debilitating and quite frightening to them. Um, is there a difference when it comes to nightmares? Is it the same thing that we're talking about? If the dream is wonderful and the dream is a nightmare, is it exactly the same thing? Or what's the understanding or belief or psychology around that? Or maybe, what did Jung say about these things? Let's say, for instance, in your study.
So, of course, there are nuances in every dream, and some people who've gone through significant trauma, their dreams are very haunting and very upsetting. And nightmares, yes, they can be recurring. In some ways, the same uh, ideas that we're bouncing around here apply. However, I want to be very sensitively attuned to that for some people, going to sleep at night is absolutely terrifying because they don't have any control over this. And so it isn't a fun ride. And at that point, I think it's really important to find a trauma-informed therapist because there are some things happening there that definitely still are helpful information, but you need someone to come alongside and co-regulate your nervous system. And I think this is a really huge piece, especially going forward in the world that we're living in. Whatever it is that brings you calm, do as much of that as you can, as long as it's not an addiction. But, for some, it's going out in nature. For some, it's taking a bath or a shower. For some, it's, sipping your favorite soup. For some, it's, putting on calming music or music that really, helps you kind of drop into that center. So there's that piece. But also, I have had the rare client who's had that experience, and they have actually worked to shut down, and this is where the human system is quite fascinating, to shut down their dreaming at night, and they are my daydreamers. And so they are dreaming, and then they get diagnosed with ADHD, and I'm like, no, it is not maybe that. I don't like these pathologizing terms. I think that we are so much more complex than that. However, for treatment purposes, I understand that methodology. But what if the daydream actually becomes the story that heals, that you are imagining and hoping for, and that even in the daydream, if there are certain things that you're daydreaming about that kind of go south or go wrong, these are the stories that maybe don't need to happen. And they are instructive that way.
Interesting.
Now, getting back to nightmares, Jung had a beautiful metaphor that it's like, and I think we talked about this last time. A mare is a female horse.
Yeah.
And a nightmare, well, you are riding the darkness of the night on that deep divine feminine energy that's moving toward the breaking dawn. So it takes some of the edge off to use some of the imagery and the symbolism to bring consolation and comfort. Now, for some people, that isn't going to work.
Right.
And trauma-informed care is just there's so much in it. But in a nutshell, a good trauma-informed therapist is going to help you learn where you are picking up your sensations in your body, what cues and clues those are giving you, how you then kind of select a tailor-made self-regulating practice, which doesn't always include mindful meditation and breath work, because some people just can't do it. I was that way back in my 30s. I couldn't get a breath further than here. I was so stressed out. So that would not have worked for me. But I can appreciate that there are other ways that you can work with things that soothe and bring the calm. And that it is absolutely critical that you have somebody who is really skilled in this and trained to come alongside to help you regulate your nervous system. This is the parenting you probably never got. That's what co-regulation is to have somebody there with you who, when you kind of start losing it, can say, okay, yeah, I see that, I hear it, I believe you, and I'm here, and how about we try this together so that you're not alone,
Yeah, that makes sense. And
So the whole thing about nightmares is it's very complex. I think at that point you're going to be wanting to work with a trauma-informed therapist, and if at all possible, a Jungian analyst who is also a trauma-informed therapist, because there you've got, kind of the full approach where you've got someone who really can help you with the symbology of your dreams from that kind of center, but also really understands what's going on with your physiology and your nervous system.
Yeah, and again, I know we touched on this a little bit in our last conversation, but I just thought in context I wanted to bring in a little bit back into this
It's
conversation. So
important. A
yeah, I
lot of
think
people have them,
yeah,
and especially now,
yeah,
because we are bombarded by imagery that is very dysregulating and upsetting.
yeah,
At the time when we're recording this, January of 2026 has
yeah,
been a shocking month on the face of the planet.
yeah,
And we are seeing things we never thought we were going to see again, some of us,
yeah,
or ever, And so just those images can kind of push out, our own ability to regulate ourselves, which
yeah.
is why also I like to encourage people to go to your dreams if they're not dysregulating, because that imagery is your original medicine,
Hmm.
and it can push away and make room for your way of being and navigating your life with field notes for your journey that come from your dreams.
Wow, that's powerful. Wow, what you just said there, that is super powerful. So, listen, this is a great conversation. And again, if you're listening, I always say you're listening for a reason. And so I got just a couple of quick questions, and then we're going to wrap up. And then I'm going to tease out what I think our next conversation could be about. We'll whet people's appetite. We'll see about that. But so first of all, I want to go back to, you talked about symbols. You talked about signs and symbols. I just have one quick question about that. So when I'm looking at my dream, is it less about decoding the symbols and more about noticing patterns, do you think?
It's both.
It's both. Okay, so
It's
it's about,
both.
okay, it's both. Okay.
I like to say both, and that's
Okay.
always my default, maybe. But
Okay.
I find that the symbols, as they show up, you may well find, if you are able to kind of show up to yourself and be willing to engage in this type of dialogue with your dreams, that they're going to reveal the patterns. Because oftentimes, even though the symbols may change a little bit,
Hmm.
what you associate to them and
Yeah.
what they represent for you may be somewhat similar. And so
Hmm.
now you are tracking your journey. You're actually picking your path of travel in your map of the conscious,
Huh.
unconscious, and the conscious. Yeah.
Interesting. No, that's really very fascinating. So, okay, so I got a question for you. Great conversation. And again, if you're listening in, yeah, contemplate. Maybe by this time you might be need a scotch, not a tea. You do what you need to do to have the conversation. But
Or
the
scotch
great
in your tea.
or scotch in your tea. But again, I think what Lenore said is really wise. If this has maybe stirred something in you that you need to process, find a professional that can help you process it if you need to. If you're struggling with nightmares, and again, there's some really good advice that Lenore encouraged you to consider getting some help and getting somebody to help you through that and figuring that way through. We're touching into an area that has a lot of really wonderful excitement for some and maybe some terror for others, and so it's not an easy conversation. But I really felt stirred that I wanted to have it with you, Lenore, and I appreciate your carefulness in the conversation. You're always very careful in the choice of your words and in prudent in your application, which I really have a lot of respect for. So thanks for that. It's a great conversation. So, Lenore, you're pressing into some other really fascinating worlds. I know that you're at this time. It's early January. I know you've been working on a book, which is going to be coming out, and that's going to be cool. I know you've got a series of really interesting a deck of cards that you've created, and Pam and I had a chance to spend some time with you recently and enter into that world with you, which was very interesting. And now I'm asking you publicly, but you can say no. I think that could be an interesting conversation, and I'd love to have it with you at some point.
Okay, well, everyone will have to kind of batten down the hatches because it's my life journey and it is interesting. However, that said, I would love that. Um, this is the whole point of why I really appreciate the work of Carl Jung, because it was very humanizing. When I was a little girl, the things that I am doing now, of course, have taken on a more complex manifestation. but I was connecting to these things when I was 3 3/4 years old.
Hmm.
So, there is a lot to be said for this ability and willingness to commit to yourself with attentiveness and attunement and acceptance and appreciation and healthy affection for yourself, and allowing these various ways of knowing to be engaged with and participated in. I have been doing this all my life on some level, knowingly or unknowingly, mostly knowingly, and was very fortunate to have a couple people in my journey early on who really supported it and said, yes, that's valid. When you have dreams, that's valid. When you find yourself drawn to certain emotion tones or energies or imagery, that's valid. So I'm very grateful for that, and I think it has helped me to become who I was meant to be and bring what I've been made to bring. But most certainly, all of that may come up for our next time is just a real interesting combination of various journeys I've taken through the terrain of my own soul, both in my day to day, but also in the dreamscape,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
that's kind of interesting because it's kind of exciting because whether it's a waking dream or a sleeping dream, you have endeavored to stay connected to a dream that's obviously been within your soul and psyche for a long time, and that's kind of an interesting thing for me. So yes, I want to explore that the next time we chat. That will be fascinating, and again, it won't be for everybody, and that's okay. It'll be for lots of people, and it'll be a lot for my listeners. And at the end of the day, I'm going to love the conversation because I found the whole thing quite fascinating for sure. So listen, I'm going to ask you this: if as we finish up, just one last word that I'm going to give you on this subject matter. But before I do that, if people wanted to track you down, particularly maybe to find out a little bit more of this world we're going to talk about, maybe, how would where's the best way for them to find you and find this world that we're going to talk about later, on the next time
So
we
you
talk?
can find me for that on Instagram. So
Okay.
on Instagram right now, and I must be honest, I am really struggling with being on Instagram just because of the state of things, and Facebook and all of that. But for now, that's what I'm using until I can come to a final decision. But actually, to see the cards, which I do offer one per weekend, and it flows into the following week, you can find me on Instagram at wise_woman_walking. And walking is spelt like WAULKING. That is the ancient Celtic term for the last name Walker,
Hmm.
and it is walking the cloth. And those who follow those traditions will understand that. So wise_woman_walking, WAULKING. That's where you can find that. You can also find me with a combination of things on For the Art of Living. That's also an Instagram handle that I use, but the Wise Woman Walking is specifically for those cards and that imagery.
Awesome. So I'm going to challenge you, listeners. You should hunt that down, and you should baptize yourself in that world before you come and listen to our next conversation because it's going to be great. The last word on dreams I'm going to give to you. So, dreams. What if people could just take one thing from this encouragement you'd want to give them about when they go to sleep tonight after listening to this, and they happen to have a dream that they might remember? What's your wisest provocation that you'd want to give them as they wake tomorrow?
Well, when you wake up, be as receptive as possible and try not to turn on the lights.
Huh.
And go to bed with your phone display on the dimmest setting it can be on while you can still see it a little bit. And then many people have a hard time because morning, it's like you got to get at it really quick. Do a speech to text recording of a journal entry, so to speak, of your dream.
Hmm.
Because then you just captured it. And then you can do the handwritten thing, which is important to use your written handwriting, or print, whatever. Um, we can get into that more another time, but that's that embodied piece. And to be willing to explore it, to connect with yourself. This is what you're doing. You're going into your undiscovered country and being able to hold the tension of not knowing right away
Yeah.
what that country is like, what its customs are like, what its culture is like, what its language is like. But think of it as a country you wanted to go to, even though you might have had a bit of hesitation, and you're willing to kind of move with the locals and understand what's going on there.
It's great advice. I love it. So listen, I always say at the end, you listen for a reason. I say it often throughout the podcast. And do me a favor, this is an uncorked conversation. So as you uncork this, as you awaken this idea, whether while you're sleeping or while you're awake, do me a favor, email me at tim@uncommodified.com or DM me and let me know how you're processing all this. And then I would just say very simply, until next time, do me a favor, stay curious, stay honest with yourself about what you dream, whether it's during waking hours or sleeping hours. And ultimately, my challenge to you is when you go to sleep tonight, sleep yourself awake. Cheers.